Welcome, welcome, welcome to our Bible study today. We're in the book of Acts. We've been looking at the continuation of the gospel from the time Christ was crucified and rose from the dead. So even though Jesus was resurrected and then ascended up into heaven, the message has not stopped, even to this point. I'm Fred Davis, pastor Mending Fences Cowboy Church. We would invite you to join us. We're on Highway 109, just south of Gallatin, at the Starstruck Farm. We meet at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning. Had a great day last Sunday. We thank the Lord for that. We hope that you did as well. But we've been looking at the opposition to Christianity by spiritual leaders in the book of Acts during the time of the apostles in Jerusalem and the surrounding area. And we've come now to see Stephen. Stephen, a man full of God's grace and power, performed amazing miracles and signs among the people. I don't understand why that when you see the good things of God, you would oppose it. The truth is, we all have a decision to make. We're either for Christ or we're against Him. There's no in between. You're in that position today. It's your decision. So here was Stephen, and you see all the good things that he was doing, and they tried to stop him, and they could not hardly do it. They tried to reason with him and get into political and spiritual debates. None of that worked. So what they did, they got a man to lie about what Stephen was saying. So we're going to look at this in verse 13. Stephen was brought before the high council. The lying witnesses said, "This man is always speaking against the holy temple and against the law of Moses." And so this was the excuse. You can go back in verse 11, see the same thing. We heard him blaspheme Moses and even God. Same thing. Now they're before the high council and they're saying that Stephen is always speaking against the holy temple. That's not true. The temple was a Jewish temple. It was the place they would come. You've heard and seen the Wailing Wall and all of that, where people come to pray and do it 3 times a day. But listen, the truth is that Jesus Christ is the seat of religious truth. So all that Stephen was doing was proclaiming the good news of the gospel of Christ. But they said in verse 14, "We have heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth will destroy the temple and change the customs of Moses handed down to us." At that point, everyone in the high council stared at Stephen. Why? Because they believed the lies. But listen to this, as they stared at him, because his face became as bright as an angel. Here he stands, being accused of speaking against the temple and against the laws of Moses. That was a lie. And so all of the high council looked at him, and his face looked like an angel. Well, we're going to continue in chapter 7 and verse 1. Then the high priest asked Stephen, "Are these accusations true? This was Stephen's reply. Brothers and fathers, listen to me. Our glorious God appeared to our ancestor Abraham in Mesopotamia before he settled in Haran. God told him, leave your native land, your relatives, and come into the land that I will show you. And so he followed God. So Abraham left the land of the Chaldeans and lived in Haran until his father died. Then God brought him here to the land where we now live. But God gave him no inheritance here. Not even 1 square foot of land. God did promise, however, that eventually the whole land would belong to Abraham and his descendants. Even though he had no children yet, God also told him that his descendants would live in a foreign land where they would be oppressed as slaves for 400 years. But I will punish the nation that enslaves them. And God said, in the end, they will come out and worship here in this place. This is Stephen before the high religious council. Verse 8, God also gave Abraham the covenant of circumcision at that time. So when Abraham became the father of Isaac, he circumcised him on the 8th day. And the practice was continued when Isaac became the father of Jacob, and when Jacob became the father of the 12 patriarchs of the Israelite nation. Now, Stephen is going to a lot of trouble to give to the high council the historical background of his father Abraham. Verse 9, these patriarchs were jealous of their brother Joseph, and they sold him to be a slave in Egypt. But God was with him. Please understand that whenever things look bleak and like we don't know what's happening, we don't know where we're going, we don't know what's going to take place, understand this. God will be with you and rescue him from all his troubles. And God gave him favor before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. God also gave Joseph unusual wisdom, so that Pharaoh appointed him governor over all of Egypt and put him in charge of the palace. So what do we see? In times when it looks dark, when there are great struggles going on, and it appears like God is nowhere to be found, God is still at work. So we find that Pharaoh appointed him over the palace. But a famine came upon Egypt and Canaan. There was great misery, and our ancestors ran out of food. Jacob heard that there was still grain in Egypt, so he sent his sons, our ancestors, to buy some food. The second time they went, Joseph revealed his identity to his brothers, and they were introduced to Pharaoh. Then Joseph sent his father Jacob and all his relatives to come to Egypt, 75 persons in all. So Jacob went to Egypt. He died there, as did other ancestors, and their bodies were taken to Shechem and buried in the tomb of Abraham. Abraham brought for a certain price from Hamar's son in Shechem. As the time drew near, when God would fulfill his promise to Abraham, the number of their people in Egypt greatly increased. But then a new king came to the throne of Egypt, who knew nothing about Joseph. This king exploited our people and oppressed them, forcing parents to abandon their newborn babies so they would die. We need to understand something as we see here that Stephen is unfolding the history of Abraham and his people. They are having a terrible, difficult time. They demanded that parents abandon their people and their children die. You would think God is not anywhere around. And as we watch what is happening in America today, we could draw the conclusion by what's going on in Washington and other places that God is nowhere to be found. Oh, listen, the devil will try to deceive you. God is at work. We need to know that. We need to believe that and put our faith in God. In verse 20, at that time, Moses was born. That's important. God mightily used Moses in the darkest hours, when it seemed as though God was nowhere to be found. God was at work, and Moses was born. Stephen is telling the high council all of this history of these people. So next time we're going to begin to look at Moses and what took place and how God worked. And I hope that your faith will be in the Lord Jesus Christ, who is the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, who rules and reigns forever.